First of all, good morning.
Good morning.
Madam
Happy
Mayor.
Pie
Nice
Day.
to see you. Oh, Happy Pie Day.
That's right.
Oh, that's the
That's
connection.
why I came.
What'd you bring?
I brought some savory pies. They're Australian style, kind of meat pies that could be for a lunch from Cup of Coffee. They have 2 locations in Boston, one in the South End, one in the West End, and they are quite good. They have a St. Patrick's Day theme, so one is steak and Guinness.
Steak and Guinness. I love that.
Well, thank you on both of our behalf. And the rest of the staff, you'll be able to eat at 2 or 2:30 or something like that, okay? So just be patient.
So, Mayor Wu, we were talking obviously about the weather, but things are going along as usual today in Boston, but you must have to make some preparations for possible big snow.
Yeah, our, this one was a funny one. Various weather forecasting services had pretty wildly different predictions, both in terms of the amount of snow that would come down, what time of day it would change from rain to snow, and also when this would, what the eventual impact would be. So we know that we're banking on the forecast being a little bit more in the 3-inch or below range in terms of eventual snow accumulation. It might get messy because it could start right around when school buses get on the road for pickup and then taking kids home in the afternoon.
How do you decide what about schools open or closed?
There's a couple factors that we look at. I can actually get into a lot of detail in this, but it's an intensive process that starts as soon as we have a hint of weather coming, and we think about how heavy this, how many total inches of snow there will be, how fast it's going to come down, because if it's stretched out over a period of time, you can clean it and plow it a lot better. What the air temperature will be, so if there's risk of students just being outside in the cold regardless of what's happening, and then what the wind situation is like, and what time of day that all starts. Does it line up with pick up and drop off in afternoon and morning? Those are our areas of greatest concern when students will be outside or commuting to and from
And
home.
one last thing, did you decide in the middle of the night before, or?
So last snow call, where we knew we would get snow but we weren't sure how much, the team, I was on a call with them at almost 11 o'clock at night. They had another one 3:45 a.m. and then another one at 6 a.m. Yesterday we decided pretty early, and then there was another 6 a.m. check-in today. But
okay.
Even though people have already started calling, I just realized I didn't give the phone number of the text line, which is 877-301-8970. You can speak directly to the mayor, or if you're the shy kind of person, you can text her and we'll read that question. You can also tweet us. I was thinking, I would say every single time we've seen you since you announced you're running for mayor, the following topic has come up: rent stabilization. And I think this is the first time since we saw you last you can actually claim that something happened. So the city council votes with 2 noes in favor, overwhelmingly in favor of your proposal. Since then, the governor has told us and anybody else that she supports cities and towns having options to do whatever they can to expand housing opportunities. Lieutenant governor has said the same thing. So all that's left, and I guess I put that in quotes, is the legislature, against the backdrop where close to 70% of people in a poll a week or so ago statewide said they support rent control. So what's your sense of the lay of the land on Beacon Hill, Mayor?
I was very happy to sign this proposal, the home rule petition, after the council vote last Friday, and alongside an important one for the city around how we're going to be transforming our Boston Planning and Development Agency, the development process in Boston. So both of those now, having been certified by the clerk this week, they will go up to the State House and get filed. And home rule petitions aren't in the usual 2-year legislative calendar, so it's really up to the discretion of the legislature when they take it and in what order.
I know you have to be nice, and I know we've had this discussion because you have to lobby and work with these people. We've had the discussion with you before about, to me, the absurdity which is baked into the system of people who come from 351 cities and towns deciding what you and the city council can do for your constituents. But with the 70% thing, I don't even understand how this works. Do you hope that Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll will talk to the legislative leaders on one of those Monday meetings? Do your people start to speak to Spilka and the House Speaker? How does this work?
Yeah, we're trying on all fronts from every angle, and we have a number of proposals up at the State House as well that are all really important to the city of Boston. So it's an ongoing conversation from every possible angle, and community members play a big role in this too, of helping to identify what the most urgent priorities are. We're in a housing crisis that couldn't, action cannot come fast enough on all sides, and so we have a number of proposals up to either generate more revenue for use in building affordable housing and closing those gaps. Our transfer fee would ensure that even after the ARPA dollars dry up in 2026 latest, that we will be able to continue the momentum to create more and more affordable housing to actually meet the
This is
demand
real
for
estate
it.
transfer fee on higher end housing, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
And rent stabilization, so that as we work to build up supply in the meantime, residents can stay in their homes. I mean, we're talking about a proposal that is extremely balanced here. Inflation plus 6%, usually it'll end up at being a 7 or 8% limit on rent increases. Most landlords across the city are decent human beings taking care of their tenants and who know that it's in their financial interest to have stable tenants who aren't then having to turn over the whole apartment, clean everything again, take change everything. When you can keep your tenants there for a number of years, it's good for everyone. It's good for our school system. It's good for our communities. And so for the people who are advocating to have the ability to implement 30% rent increases, 100% rent increases, I mean, maybe you're talking about a brief window of short-term profit, but that is hurting all of us, all including those very real estate folks in the medium and long run.
For people that want to call or text us and speak with Mayor Wu, who'll be with us until noontime, the number's 877-301-8970. Mayor Wu, you realize that the Greater Boston Real Estate Board is not happy with any rent control proposals, or at least they're not happy with this rent control, if they would ever be happy with the rent control proposition. I think they've spent $400,000 already to fight this. Have you spoken with them or gotten to what the problem is or what would make them less opposed?
Yeah, and I've seen some of the flyers. They want the ability to implement drastic rent increases again for maybe a few people's very short-term interest, but in everyone's long-term harm. And we've had public conversations. They were participating in the city council hearings and working sessions along the way, and they have said there's no point at which they would be willing to compromise on any of it. They have said, this proposal itself is one of the most reasonable that they have seen, and they have acknowledged that we have taken steps to ensure that it won't harm housing production, and that we're really aiming to use a number of tools all together comprehensively. But they are paid to lobby for a constituency that and to create the sense that we need unfettered access for the economy to do its thing. Clearly that hasn't been working, and clearly the vast majority of landlords are already doing the right thing. This is just about protecting those residents, and we see it in the news all the time, who do experience unnecessary and unaffordable extreme rent increases.
Two last things on rent control, and by the way, then we'll get to some calls at 877-301-8970. Speaking of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board and any other landlords groups, you exempt new construction for what, 15 years? I mean,
That's right.
so okay. So when we talked, we invited listeners to call about the rent stabilization proposal the day after the city council approved it, and a couple of callers said the exact same words, and then we found the exact same words in a landlords group a mailing, which was that whatever the rent control, I don't know what it's called, the rent control board that would be created should this, or rent stabilization board, should this become law, actually has the power in certain circumstances to adjust the 10% cap that you've put in the 10% cap. And the concern voiced by a couple of the callers was that basically allows for smaller increases to be approved, which would penalize landlords. Is that an accurate assessment of the content of the bill?
What do you mean smaller increases?
I mean that that landlords could get a surer end of the stick. I should have put it that way. If there's certain conditions that are pled before the rent stabilization board by a tenant. I'm sorry I didn't explain that well.
Okay, got it.
That is true, is it not?
I mean, we are doing this through a home rule petition. That means that and we had a choice as to what to file up to the State House. One
Yeah.
strategy was just ask for blanket authorization to do what we do at the city level, or ask for a wide range of numbers in terms of what the percentage cap could be. That will give us the flexibility to decide things later on. But knowing that there would be a lot of fear mongering about what Boston would do and what this could result in, we decided to be very clear about what we believe is the exact right balance and to be specific about putting those numbers forward. And so those numbers, should they be approved by the state legislature as well, will be the numbers. There's we have exemptions for new construction. We have exemptions if you are that sort of organizational structure would exist, because we take into account that if you're putting a lot of money into the building to do a drastic renovation, that you can then be compensated for that. If you need to adjust things in order to do that, we don't at all want to disincentivize people to maintain their buildings or to build new housing. We in fact also take away a major part of the bureaucratic struggle that I think had frustrated folks in the past and in other cities.
What's
where
that?
in between tenancies, some other cities have it so that when a tenant leaves, the new tenant must come in at the same level as if that old tenant were still there. It could only be increased by that amount. Our provision is very clear that this is about protecting people who live in the buildings right now. And if they move out, a new person comes in, that landlord is able to have a market reset and start at a new level of rent, however much they want. Otherwise, you can get into funny situations where in a large building, depending on how long one particular tenant stayed versus another, the rents are all strange and different. We did not want that bureaucratic extra mess in there, and so this is very clear. We have one goal, and that is to protect residents from extreme unaffordable renting.
We're talking to Mayor Michelle Wu. She's here to take now your calls and texts at 877-301-8970.
Richard in the North End, thank you for calling.
Hey, Richard.
Good morning. Good
Hi.
morning.
Good
Hi.
morning.
Mayor Wu, with the city's historic St. Patrick's Day parade just a few days away, can you speak to any notable challenges or changes to this year's parade, including the return to the longer historical route, and also, if I may, the changes put in place to make the parade more family friendly and to reduce rowdiness or unruly behavior?
Thank you so much for calling, Richard. I'm really excited about this weekend's festivities. The parade committee has put in a lot of effort, and this will be the first time in many years that Boston has had this kind of original restored parade route. Many people think about St. Patrick's Day as just a time for green and sort of a certain type of partying, as Richard suggests. But in the neighborhood itself, in South Boston, it is a celebration of St. Patrick and the kind of Irish immigrant roots of many of our communities, as well as Evacuation Day, Boston's important role in the Revolution and the historical sites that are throughout our city related to that, including Dorchester Heights in South Boston and other landmarks. And so the parade route actually goes by several of these historical sites and monuments. It is a longer route, and Boston Police are stepping up and making sure that we have the staffing and the planning and preparation for that. Some of the local businesses are also working in close concert with the city, so liquor stores will be closing at 4 p.m. the day of the parade as well, just because we want to make sure that there's not additional reason for things to go sideways. And BPD will be out. The parade committee has worked really hard to add many more marching bands and just different groups that will be marching who are there to delight the kids, and we want to make sure that families have a great time.
Richard, thanks for the call. I have a question though. You had a press conference with the police commissioner yesterday about this, right? And let me quote what he said. He says, doing stuff that's making people uncomfortable. We have zero tolerance for violating any law. The way, well, I guess I shouldn't say how I interpret it. I assume this is about, in part, this nationalist social club, the neo-Nazis who were there last year
he was responding to that.
with Keep Boston Irish. I would hope that Keep Boston Irish would make everyone uncomfortable. But if all they do is have a sign, they're not violating the laws, and they're entitled, unfortunately, to do that. Are they not?
They, we have basic rights in this country, but there's a zero tolerance policy for any action that would violate city, state, or federal laws that go beyond that. And so whether it is defacing public property or taking action that is causing conflict with people in the area, there will be a close watch on what's
Do you have any
happening.
idea if they're coming? Do you have any
We don't
information?
have specific information or intelligence.
You know, I have the North End caller was talking about the parade, but this is a North End caller that's talking about outdoor dining. Actually, it's a texter. This person says the citywide economic benefits of North End outdoor dining are hard to ignore: jobs, reasonable fees to the city, sales tax, commerce, established tourism. Why not compromise? This is talking about people being able to have their restaurants, the tables out on the sidewalk. Reduce patio size for a restaurant, says the texter. Most past complaints were from the same small group of residents and were unsubstantiated. Tell people what's going on in the North End, because I think there's not going to be.
There won't be outdoor dining in the
Yeah.
North End. There won't be on-street outdoor
On-street.
dining in the North End this year. You know, and I love outdoor dining. I've been trying to push our entire administration to do more to open up the streets and create opportunities for people to be together in community. We know this is a huge boost for our small businesses, but also for neighborhoods to be able to get to know each other and have more shared space to build community. The North End, geographically and how it's set up, is different from anywhere else in the state. Outdoor dining is immensely popular everywhere in Boston, and we've had a pandemic-based emergency program that really created the chance for us to test this out in all different neighborhoods in the city. This is the only neighborhood where residents have been begging us to shut it down. And you can see why. There's nowhere else where there are 90 plus restaurants in a quarter square mile radius. And that creates a lot of impacts when they're all in the street, because the sidewalks aren't wide enough to accommodate them being on the sidewalk like in some other neighborhoods. This is the only part of the city where that is the physical makeup of the neighborhood, and that residents are, it's not just a very small group, it is a widespread stressor in that neighborhood. And so we've been testing out different things over previous years. It hasn't quite worked out. We had additional barriers this year to even be able to replicate all that we had done last year. We already spent way more in terms of city services in this one part of the city to try to make it work. And so we need to just take some time and see if there's a way to actually get it right for the restaurants. But Boston is a city where, for me, the most important thing is our neighborhoods need to be livable for the people who live there.
When you say see if there's time to get it right, meaning that you're still thinking of some additional changes, or are you talking about the conditions that you already have established? What did you mean by that?
There is a group that's being assembled now to specifically think about outdoor dining in the North End, and whether by not this summer but next year's season there could be some different arrangement. Maybe it is a more open streets like model where it's certain days of the week, or there's just a lot of logistical planning that would have to go into something, and so they'll sort it out and come up with recommendations, and we'll think about it.
Okay, let's go to Paul. I think you have the wrong city and the wrong mayor, but we'll try it anyway. Paul in Providence, you're on with Boston's mayor, Michelle Wu. Hey, Paul, what's up?
Hi, so delighted to be talking to the new mayor, and I am from Chicago, and I'm here to attend school at Harvard.
Oh,
And
okay.
one of the things that I really love about Chicago is that the mayor was really big on putting trees. Every lot, you can have 2 trees come in, the city will put in trees for you. And I noticed there's such a dearth of trees in the neighborhood that I'm wondering, do you have a tree czar? Or are you
Tree
working
czar.
with the Innovation Lab? Mayor Richard Daley did a huge service to the city of Chicago, going so far as to put a green roof on City Hall. And these things have a big effect on the urban heat and lower people's electricity bills in the summer, et cetera, et cetera.
We got it.
Poor neighborhoods do not have trees.
We got it. Let's hear what the mayor has to say, Paul.
You're speaking my language, Paul. I totally agree with all of that, and I'll just share a little bit of the, I agree with everything that you said in terms of why we need to do this. Trees are the best green technology that already exists. They are all the difference when it comes to flooding and heat and the many issues that Boston is already facing with climate change. We know there's a 10-degree temperature difference in the summer between our neighborhoods with a greater tree canopy and those with more asphalt than trees. The challenge here in Boston, we've had many big tree goals over many, many years. And even when trees have been planted in larger numbers, they do not survive. And so our tree mortality rate was in the 40% plus range, and we needed to address that as we are looking to plant more trees. A great, amazing community partner organization called Speak for the Trees has already identified and mapped out basically every single tree pit that exists in a sidewalk in the city, and where there are empty pits, so that we know the lowest hanging fruit of where trees should be planted. But for all of the city, for many years, we only had one arborist on staff taking care of 35,000 street trees and all of our parks trees. And so we have actually, in the recent months, built out an entire arborist team. I think adding 4 more people, including what could be called a tree czar. We've created our Power Core program, which brings young people into learning how to be part of the green economy with green infrastructure, maintaining trees, and they're actually now expanding into some energy efficiency training as well to be able to step into these jobs. And we're looking to ensure that we can protect trees on public property, coordinate on private property. And so our Chief of Energy, Environment, and Open Space, Reverend Mariam White-Hammond, has gone to Montreal, picked up all sorts of models from all across the country, and we're in the process of implementing them now.
Did you read the Lorax to your kids?
I do. I was just asked by a
That's a
second grade
great book.
class what my favorite book was.
Is that-
I wrote the Lorax to them.
I speak
So-
for the trees.
One of the greats. Paul, thank you for your call.
Give the number, Jim.
Mayor, the number's 87. You give the number, sure.
877
You do it better than I do
301
anyway.
I really do.
You do.
87. Well, let me do it again.
Try it again. Yes.
877-301-8970 is the number at which you can call or text to speak with the mayor or write a note to the mayor.
You know, for months and months and months, we've been asking you about a police officer who had some involvement on January 6th, who had tweeted that the Mike Pence said was treasonous, that he hoped he didn't sleep well, etc. He's been on medical leave, living in New Hampshire. And every month we've asked you what's going on. It's been a lot of time since January of a couple of years ago. Yesterday we found out what's going on. He and another cop who'd been a leader in some of these anti-vax efforts, and so was he, by the way, both were fired. Why were they fired?
So, in fact, there have been a number of officers. There was a third officer as well in the last couple months related to the January 6th situation where, let me back up and say, police officers perform some of the most important work in Boston and in our society. They are law enforcement officers. They are called sworn officers for a reason. They swear an oath to uphold the laws of our country, our state, and our city, and as well as the rules of the Boston Police Department. That is how we implement public safety, is by ensuring the public trusts that the laws will be upheld, that rules will be followed fairly. And that means at a very baseline, our officers have to follow the rules. I support Commissioner Cox's decision to move forward with termination for these officers. Each has a separate set of actions and misconduct that was detailed, investigated, thorough due diligence conducted, and decided through the Internal Affairs Department that there were multiple violations of departmental rules that should lead to termination here.
But at least when he said yesterday, the commissioner, that he violated Salvaciano, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, violated 2 rules in the department's code of ethics. One of those 2 things did relate to January 6th. Is that correct?
There were concerning posts that were made that seemed to convey threats
Around January 6th.
around January 6th.
And you said another cop was fired recently for January 6th activities?
It was related to.
What was that?
Sorry. Similarly, I mean, there was a series of communications publicly, including commenting on the call for information and asking for people who were involved to step forward and share that. There was a comment publicly around rats get bats, right? Actually, in multiple of these cases, actually, the phrase rats get bats has come about. That is just not, it's, who can trust a police officer who has been given extraordinary authority to seize property or use force or carry a weapon and a badge if their mindset is rats get bats and that threat of violence in sort of overriding what they believe is their version of what should be upheld rather than the laws of our society.
Do you have any involvement in the decision to fire any of these 3 cops? Or is
No,
this all...
I read the decisions that came out just so I would ensure know what was happening. But I support the commissioner in his actions here.
Mayor, well, we've talked for years about police commissioners' frustration. Apparently, Commissioner Cox shares this, that police officers who are fired, and Ed Davis talked about this, Evans talked about this, then they get reinstated through arbitration. I know you're pushing, and apparently Commissioner Cox is too, to remove the arbitration piece and move this to civil service. Is it...
You told us it was a red line last time, I believe you said, when we were talking about it.
I assume because this hasn't happened yet, these people that are filing to go to arbitration, their
That's right.
fate will be determined by arbitration. But what does it mean to get to civil service? What's the procedure? How's that happen?
Police officers in Boston especially are held to a very high standard of conduct, of following the rules, just so that we all in our community can trust that those who are enforcing the laws are not above the law themselves. And when an officer has been documented and had that internal process investigation conclude with the designation, with the decision that that merits termination, the misconduct merits termination in that case, that should stand. Their officers were let go for a reason, and we need to be able to uphold and maintain those very high standards of conduct in the department. And so, in this administration, we are, no matter where we, when we are able to get to agreement on a contract, no matter what that contract says, again, for me, this is a very clear line that this needs to be part of it. But whatever the context is, when an officer has gotten that termination decision from the department, we need to do what we can to make that stick.
But you'd have to go through some procedure to get from arbitration to a civil service decision.
Oh, so okay, sorry, sorry, I forgot your question. So, there are 2 mechanisms really. One is civil service, which is rights and contractual matters. It's less about the determination of whether something merited termination and more about, did the facts as were documented in that decision leading up to termination, were those facts true and accurate and was that real? Arbitration kind of can throw everything up into the air, and there's multiple arbitrators that are engaged. Some are more, from their career tend to be more friendly to one side or another, and that's why there's multiple of them that, one that both parties agree on and others that kind of are engaged on each side. It can be quite an arbitrary process at times. I know these arbitrators are doing their best, but the way that the process kind of restarts the judgment is can cause these things to go on, and I think we can all agree that a multi-year process to decide a resolution while people are getting paid in the process to do nothing or just cause more strain on the department, which then creates more overtime for someone else. We need to have some predictability in this process, and by reducing the avenues for everything to be all up in the air again, this puts the authority where it belongs, in the commissioner's office and in our police commissioner, and in the processes that already exist to ensure that the facts are being certified.
We're talking to Mayor Michelle Wu. She'll be with us till the top of the hour. The number is 877-301-8970. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're not at the library. I think you probably figured that out already. We will be back on Friday. We're in Studio 3 with the Mayor of the City of Boston, Michelle Wu. She's here till the top of the hour to take your questions at 877-301-8970. The next caller, I'm not sure this is your name, and I have no idea where you're calling from. Apparently your name is something like Jelly. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Good. Where are you calling from?
So I'm calling from Russell, Massachusetts, which
Okay.
is in the hills of West Massachusetts.
Okay.
I don't blame you for that.
Shoot.
Hello,
Shoot.
Jelly.
Glad
Jelly.
you called.
What's up?
Yeah. So Mayor Wu, hi.
Hi.
I'm calling to ask about, not only your reaction to the Willow project that was recently approved for, in Alaska, but also on top of that, what can young people? So I'm 16. I'm calling in because it's a snow day, and I'm happy to be able to call in.
Is it actually snowing out there right now?
It's actually snowing right here right now.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
We got starting to get a little.
Go ahead, Jelly.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, not only for your reaction to that project being approved, but also what young people like myself and people of all ages can do, not only on a national level to try to combat destructive things such as that project to our environment, but also if there are any local things, whether it be in Boston or anywhere in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
that people can write to elected officials about, anything like that.
By the way, the Willow Project, for those who don't know, is the Biden, the President of the United States, just approved this drilling in Alaska that's quite controversial.
Catastrophic, according to the environmentalists.
But go, take it away, Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, it can feel so overwhelming some days because we see the signs all around us of how our climate is already impacting communities and always our most vulnerable community members, and then there are these kind of massive issues that are brought up that can feel far away but really demoralizing as well. I would just say that with every major decision, whether it's a political decision, a policy decision, it still comes down to people who are at the table. And I think our political system has shown that we have a long ways to go before the voices of those most directly impacted are actually heard the most, right? There's campaign finance reform that's needed. There's all sorts of stuff happening, especially at the federal level. But where it can really make a difference, where it's at the space where you can have a real impact on who is at the table making these decisions, that is right at the very local level. And when cities move, we can generate a lot of momentum to combat or set the tone for what's possible all across the world, really. I just had a visit last week from the mayor of Sejong City in South Korea, who is Mayor Choi is trying to implement fare-free bus in his city by 2025. So he came to visit Boston to check out how it works. The timing was great because we just released our most recent kind of look back on the data on how our fare-free bus pilot has been working over a year plus now, and the numbers continue to justify and show the benefit when we make things accessible for people and it's environmentally the right decision. We in fact reap the benefits in many, many ways. And so I know the Willow Project is really frustrating and we have a lot to do to get to a place where our federal government is actually responsive to the urgent needs of our communities. But I believe that if you start locally, if you run for office, if you get involved in campaigns locally, if you reach out about projects that are happening in cities that you live in or that are nearby to you, it can add up, and we are seeing that impact in many ways in what Boston's doing.
Can you, Jelly, thanks for your call. Can you just spend 15 seconds? You say the numbers, as I think the comparison you released, correct me if I'm wrong, is pre-pandemic and now free buses and buses for which you have to pay. Could you describe briefly to people what the numbers look like?
Yeah, even with a kind of shift towards more industries being remote or people not needing to come in person anymore, just less in-person stuff everywhere, these particular bus routes that have been fare free are at just they're close to 75% of their pre-pandemic ridership levels, which is way higher than any other bus route is compared to their what's called recovery back to pre-pandemic levels. I have been on these buses at all times of the day. The 28 bus is one of those that is the kind of extra long. It's 2 segments that's connected with the stretchy thing in the middle, the reticulated bus. And it's full all the time. Both buses, no matter when you get on. And so we know the need is there. We hear the benefits that have been documented in some of our research as well about how people are able to just have more freedom in planning out their days and making the pieces of their lives fit together. It helps the buses run faster because they're not being held back by people waiting in line to pay one by one, which means that we are saving fuel before we move to electric buses. We're saving fuel, and we're getting more reliability because the buses can come back and do more routes.
One more brief thing. Jelly was 16. I think it was in front of it. Was it the Boston Municipal Research Bureau where you spoke about youth initiatives? Can you give us, for the summer, I assume, can you give us a short list of what you talked about?
Yeah, our young people are the foundation of what we need to be doing. We also see a lot of impacts nationwide, but also here in Boston around mental health and the need for supports, particularly coming out of a very challenging several years where everything was shaken up and a lot of isolation and trauma and being away from peers all took place. And so we are moving forward on doing everything we can to provide the supports through our school system and our youth and families support infrastructure to make sure that we're guaranteeing every young person in Boston has what they deserve. A great education, great opportunities, healthcare that is connected, and we're kind of framing this in addition with 5 commitments. If you grow up as a kid in Boston, we are going to do everything we can to guarantee that you learn how to ride a bike, know how to swim, get a chance to play youth sports, participate in the arts, and have experience growing in a garden, right? So those are, everything else is how we usually talk about young people, right? How they have to study, how they have to do in math and science and all that. But it's really important for Boston to be that hub where we recognize the totality of who you are as people, even from when you're really young.
Yeah, you've got 3 new swimming pools going to be reopened, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
we're so excited.
Tell us about that.
That's a major part of not only this initiative to connect people to families, to the ability to learn how to swim with community pools, but also our climate resilience strategy as well. The heat has become more and more overbearing in the summer, and so having this infrastructure is an important heat resilience strategy. Our pools, like many of our city buildings, had not been looked after in the way that I think they that we are trying to make sure they will moving forward. And so many of them were past the date that they could functionally operate, needed renovations here and there. We also had staffing challenges with lifeguard positions being empty and needing to be filled. And so we've worked on many of those issues and come up with new structures for the staffing and compensation and training. And so we're really excited that these 3 pools will be back up and running, and we have a couple more that we're looking to fix that will need bigger renovations over the months to come.
This is a text from someone who identifies themselves as Imani Gomes Smith. The person writes, I live in Mattapan. I am the parent of a murdered son. My question for Mayor Wu is why she has not publicly addressed the violence, murders, fentanyl deaths, and overdoses in our city.
I am so sorry, Mr. Smith, and I, wherever I can, am fighting to make sure that every child in our city, every person in our city can be safe, feel safe, and has every opportunity that they need to reinforce that in their lives and in their communities. There is nothing that any of us can say to comfort someone who has lost a loved one and had a life robbed from them because of violence. We know that there are challenges everywhere, but we are going to do everything that it takes to bring justice and accountability in all of those situations so that public safety is very clearly the guarantee, and we're taking actions on all those fronts to build the infrastructure so that all of our young people have the choice, every possible choice ahead of them in their lives. But I would love to follow up with you to see if there's anything else that the city could be doing just to make sure that you and your family have what you need in this moment as
Could
well.
you text back and give us contact information, please, and if you choose, and we'll share with the mayor if you choose to share with us.
I've got the phone number.
Oh, you do? Great. Just briefly on this, Mayor, I believe Commissioner Cox yesterday said overall violent crime is down in the city, but homicides are up. Is that not correct?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to generalize just given a very short time period. I did a deep dive on all homicides in the city over the last decade or so with the police department a few weeks ago, just to make sure I could understand any trends that we're seeing and to be able to prepare for this summer so that it is all hands on deck and ensuring that we can put resources where they're needed and support families and support safety across all of our neighborhoods. And you can see some of these numbers. Sometimes there's it looks like a spike in January and then it ends up being lower in the year. Sometimes it looks low in January, February, and then it's higher in the year. And so we look at our averages and we're going to do everything we can to keep these numbers trending down.
G or D, my apologies if one of those is wrong, which it must be. Welcome to the show. You're on with the mayor.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
It's G, like the letter before H.
Hi, G. Pleasure. Nice to have you.
Hi. Yes, I'm calling from Belmont, and I'm calling as a member from Belmont Celebrates AAPI Heritage. First, I just want to say it's an honor to speak with you, Mayor Wu.
Thank you, G.
This committee was started as a response to all the activities against the Asian community during COVID, and the messaging that was sent to the Asian community, the Asian American community, which was go back home. And so the committee was created by parents to say, well, we are home. And there's a tremendous amount of positive things that were done by the Asian American community. And so, to have a mayor in Massachusetts with an Asian American heritage, to our children, you're such a positive influence, a great role model. And so, I was wondering, I know that you are a mayor of Boston, and we're outside of Boston, but would you be willing, considering to share your messaging, your positive messaging, perhaps to our communities outside, and visit our students?
Oh, thank you so much.
Especially during the month of AAPI Heritage, which is the month of May.
No, it's so. I'm honored that I'm honored at the invitation. Thank you so much for thinking of me. We can definitely check with the schedule, although May tends to be a little bit busy, so I will find a way to, maybe I can send a video or spend some time, or maybe some of your students can come visit us in Boston even. But thank you for what you're doing. I have experienced some of those same things during the pandemic and very much some of the same sentiments, and it makes such a difference for our little ones, our young people, to see examples. I was sobbing during the Oscars, right, to see Michelle Yeoh and Kevin Kwan win, and just how excited the cast of Everything Everywhere All at Once and so many in the Asian American community were. I remember growing up and not seeing anyone on TV who looked like me except for Michelle Kwan for a period, and that had a big impact. Everyone kept telling me growing up, maybe you should become a figure skater, right? And so role models and examples make a big difference, and we need to see that across all our communities.
Gee, thanks for the call. Mayor, there was a story in the Globe a couple of week or so ago. Want to know what Boston electeds text each other? Good luck is the headline. So do you communicate about work via text at all?
I am a millennial, so I use text messages, but I work very hard not to communicate about work-related things with any of my colleagues, and to follow the provisions around what needs to be retained for public records law. The business that we do is over documents and emails and all that, and
But is some via text, it sounds like? your public records person is quoted in this thing saying that, quote, the mayor does not conduct official city business via text message and does not retain text messages. Forget the second half. The first half, is that accurate?
That is the policy, and so we will.
But is the practice?
That,
No.
yes, it is a practice.
Yeah, one last thing about this. There's this lawyer, a partner, Todd and Weld, who is quoted here saying that when these text messages, I think described by your person as transitory messages, he's quoted saying the law is such that the public records law, it doesn't matter if it's written on a napkin, a text message, or a formal memo, it's a public record. Do you agree at least with his statement of the law?
Yes.
But you're not saving the text despite that.
My text messages are mostly, hey, can you give me a call? Or, happy Lunar New Year, for
Okay.
example. And so the business that we do, it happens through city channels and is documented in the way that needs
But
to be
there really is
documented.
you haven't sent a text, even one, that is work related? Because that's what your public records person is saying.
I
None.
do not conduct work business over my text
Fair
message.
enough. Let's go to Matthew in Dorchester. You're on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, Matthew.
Hi, yes. Thank you for taking time for my question.
Sure.
I'm just curious with the latest headlines about private equity, from migrant child labor in the New York Times, unfair housing practices with Wall Street, landlords, surprise medical billing. Will Boston and Massachusetts reconsider their pension funds allocation of nearly $30 billion to this asset class that Elizabeth Warren has just introduced legislation called Stop the Looting?
Mayor.
Thank you, Matthew. In fact, there had been multiple efforts to make sure that our investments as a city, not only our pension funds, but also the sort of where the cash on hand of the city is banked, that those follow standards. And there have been ordinances passed over previous years that I've been involved with, so that we are guaranteeing certain groupings of industries that we do not allow for any of our money to go to, alcohol, tobacco, private prisons, fossil fuels, and the like, and to have a standard ESG policy for how the city's investments go. Our pension funds are largely, there's sort of two buckets of them, and they're largely involved. The biggest bucket is with the state through Mass Prim and the teachers' pensions. And so there's a little bit of state policy also that is there, but the part that we fully control through the Boston retirement system and the pensions of all of our other retirees, we work to make sure that first and foremost their retirements are secure and protected, but we know that in fact the best decision is to put to protect their retirement money in funds that are not volatile, like fossil fuels and the like.
Mayor, a couple of people texted and asked what's happening on One Boston Day this year. What is happening?
One Boston Day in 2023 is the 10-year anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombings, and we have really just inspired every day by our survivor community here in Boston and the many, many people who were impacted, whether they were at the finish line or had a family member impacted or were a first responder or member of our healthcare community. So we're working with them to ensure that we have an appropriate and respectful commemoration of what occurred, the unspeakable tragedy that happened 10 years ago, while also respecting our survivor community's hope that we don't continue dwelling only on that moment, and that in fact this has catalyzed a strength and collaboration in Boston that has led us to be able to create an amazing set of actions and partnerships since then. And so we're going to be working side by side. There will be a new finish line unveiled and a wreath laying with the survivor community. There will be many public commemorations, and then we will that is taking place the Saturday, the day of the One Boston Day, the 15th, the actual anniversary of that date. And then the marathon on Monday will be back in its full glory.
Aren't there volunteer things and that sort of stuff, like civic?
Yes.
Are they on a website somewhere that people will be able to check out?
let me make sure I have the website.
Well, wait,
right.
we'll get it in
we
a
will
second.
pull
We
it
have
up,
4
but
minutes before
there's
you.
You know-
we encourage everyone to perform acts of kindness, and so you can submit examples of what you're going to do and check out a checklist there for ideas. But we want everyone to feel part of the community that Boston is every day, especially on this day.
You know, we just got a text from Carlos Arredondo from Rosendale. You may know he was the
course.
gentleman that was photographed pushing a wheelchair for a man who would lose his legs. I remember it was Mr. Bauman? Was it Mr.
I think
Bauman?
so, yeah.
I think so.
And he and his wife have done incredible work, I should say.
Anyway, Carlos wants to know why no survivors with hearing loss or PTSD or civilian first responders from the Boston bombing involved in planning the One Boston ceremony. I guess he wasn't involved.
We encourage. There's still time, and it's really about ensuring that people know these specific events. So I will make sure we reach out to Mr. Arredondo and get him looped in as well.
You know, I talk about a horrible transition. These pies are unbelievable. I'm sorry, but they are. If you weren't listening at the top of the show, the mayor is always kind to bring us something. Cup of coffee is really
Cup of coffee,
Guinness
savory,
and beef.
Australian style
Oh
pan
my
pies.
God, they are spectacular. Thank you and thank them. Can you squeeze something in from a text for 1 minute?
Well, we have someone who wants to know about liquor licenses. Sean from West Roxbury.
Oh, that's
wants to
an
know
easy, quick answer.
any plan to lower liquor licenses. And someone else from Charlestown is complaining that everything is being overbuilt in Charlestown. It's turning into another seaport. Too many high rises. Not enough open space, green space. So we get two questions.
And you have
for
1 minute.
All right, I got it. I got this. Liquor licenses, I mean, it's unbelievable still that there are certain neighborhoods in the city, neighborhoods where many of our residents of color live, that do not have sit-down restaurants because the liquor license system is one that's a sort of government monopoly and involves lots of financial barriers. There's been work on this over many years. City Councilor Worrell, in fact, has introduced a proposal to add more liquor licenses specifically targeted for our neighborhoods who are underserved right now, and so I know he's moving forward with that, maybe even in the next week or so. And on the Charlestown, you know, I think this sentiment all across the city of everything is happening and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't fit together. This is why we need changes to how we think about planning, development, and zoning. Charlestown, in fact, is one of the neighborhoods that has a master planning process ongoing right now, and so we'll continue working with the community to make sure that we have all of the various parts that are necessary, open space, schools, access, transportation, housing looped into that. And I will follow up. Thank you to Michael, the website for One Boston Day, boston.gov/one-Boston.
Michael is her colleague who is with us in the studio. Mayor Wu, thanks for coming all the way out to Brighton. We're sorry about the library.
Thank you very much, and thank you as usual for the wonderful presence. And one of these days, we deadbeats will
We'll
get our act
return.
together.
Mayor Wu,
Okay.
it's good to see you.
Thank
Thanks so
you
much
very
for coming
much.
in.
Fun
We
to be here
appreciate
as
it.
always.
Yes.